Today, we are exploring abandoned former Soviet military bases around Berlin in Germany. Primarily, these bases were built by Germany before World War II. After Germany's defeat, Berlin area became under control of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Army took possession of these infrastructures. At the end of the Cold War around 1990, these places were returned to German authorities, which had no use for them anymore. In this video, we will see the most interesting and the most emblematic parts of 4 of these compounds, mostly left untouched since the Soviet Army left. The biggest part of these compounds are the barracks where the soldiers used to live. They are very large, 70 meters long, 3 or 4 story buildings. Most of these buildings are just corridors and rooms or apartments to no end. This makes exploring these compounds quite tricky, because each site includes tens of these buildings, which most of the time are empty and very similar, but sometimes may reveal some interesting surprise. Most of these buildings were built before World War II, so they are very far from today's housing standards, and particularly the heating was done using individual wood or coal stoves. When Soviet people left, of course they removed everything of importance from the buildings, but sometimes some everyday objects were just abandoned and are still there. I crossed a number of reglementary boots, which maybe were not considered very comfortable or desirable shoes. Soviets were really imaginative when it came to wall covering. It's very common to find walls covered with newspapers for insulation, most of the time with the famous Pravda newspaper. We will see a lot of these in this video, but Soviets also had a thing for wall paintings. These paintings are mostly found in common services buildings, but some can be found in rooms and apartments. As you could expect, most of the soldiers did not benefit from private bathrooms. Bathrooms were common and shared, and were most often located at the end of the corridors in those long barrack buildings. Something else which is frequently found when exploring these buildings are rooms closed with wire mesh screen doors. Very likely these rooms were used to store goods, and access was restricted to those managing the goods. Almost all of these buildings have basements with a lot of underground rooms. Just like the barracks, this may be boring to explore, except for some occasional and unexpected interesting finds. Actually, Soviet people obviously did not only use these basements for storage, but also as a living space, as I found shelters, drying rooms, and even rooms that seemed to have been inhabited. Sometimes you can see a small building which seems to be just a small private house. Likely this may have been some officer's home. These compounds used to be home to hundreds of soldiers, and providing food for them was an important part of the site's logistics. Hence, in each compound, you will find one or several buildings with kitchens and big rooms that were likely used as canteens. Canteens are among the places where you are sure to spot some of those interesting mural paintings. Along with canteens, you can also find other common services buildings, such as laundry, fire brigade, police station with a jail, school, and so on. But as these buildings are now empty, it's not always easy to tell what they used to be. Sometimes, in the long housing buildings, one can find big rooms, with or without partitioning. I wonder if they were used as office space, some kind of open space before their time, or maybe used as classrooms for soldiers' training courses. Sometimes in these rooms, some boards can be found with historical propaganda glorifying the Soviet regime and its victory over fascist Germany. People living in these compounds were forbidden to have any contact with the local population. This meant that these places had to be self-sufficient, not only at a logistical level, but also about social and cultural matters. This is why these compounds are equipped with bars and even movie theaters and theaters. What you can see here is not a graveyard, but what is left of benches from an open-air movie theater. You can see the building housing the giant screen, as well as a small building housing the projectors. Sports were also part of everyday life in these places. This goes from large sports halls like this one to smaller training rooms or dedicated rooms in schools. This is here an example of lucky find that you can make in the barracks basements. A small gym room with do-it-yourself fitness equipments. One of those is even made out of a piece of tank caterpillar. These infrastructures are dedicated to sport too, but more specifically for military drilling and combat training. Horizontal bars, parallel bars, and even a pommel horse. Here also, do-it-yourself rules, with some combat training devices made out of old tires. When they left, the Soviet people removed everything of significant interest, including of course all the military equipment. However, you can still see buildings that were dedicated to this equipment, likely housing trucks, tanks, or even missile carriers. And in these buildings, you may find forgotten objects of minor importance, like wooden crates that may be used to contain weapons or ammunitions, and even sometimes gas masks or parts of them. The Panzerfarm is a well-known highlight in one of the sites and one of the few reminders of its military past. This is actually a swimming pool connected to a mock-up tank with its turret to be able to simulate and train for the evacuation out of a flooded vehicle. We have seen some mural paintings used for decorative purpose, but Soviet people also used them to promote the greatness of the Soviet Union and the power of their army. These abandoned Soviet compounds are scattered with Soviet symbols and military depictions, in the form of statues or paintings, some of them still pristine, some of them fading out in decay. All the components of the Soviet army are celebrated, from tanks to boats and U-boats to planes and also missiles, which of course included nuclear missiles. Actually, the Soviet army positioned nuclear missiles on launchers as a base to hit Western countries, and this unknowingly from the East German authorities, who may not have been fully happy with this. In reaction, NATO countries had similar bases in West Germany, where they arranged nuclear missiles to be able to hit the Soviet Union. I was happy to be able to find this painting, which is located in the hall from the very derelict theater that we have seen in the previous images. This one is among the most recently done, with vivid colors and, contrary to the theater itself, still stays in a very good conservation state. In this former military academy, one can find the most famous painting from the Soviet era, which explorers used to call the last Soviet soldier in Germany. It's remarkably well preserved, despite some recent unwelcome writing. Here also you can find the glorification of all the Soviet army components. As in a lot of abandoned places, another kind of wall paintings can be found with urban art. Here are some nice ones, which I like as long as they do not cover the original Soviet paintings. This particular painting reminds me of Banksy work. Do you think that could be him? Feel free to write your opinion in the comments. There are at least 20 of these military bases just around Berlin, and one could spend days or even weeks exploring them. When they were given back to Germany, the country had little to no use for them and just left them decaying, which they are doing now for 30 years. Actually, there seems to be no will from the country to preserve these traces of the past, and rather a will to destroy them, with or without redeveloping the area. This is different in other countries like Poland, Hungary or the Czech Republic, where they even sometimes turn such bases into museums. Nowadays, a lot of urban explorers illegally enter these places to be able to have a look at what was hidden from German people for many years, and save a bit of this past on pictures and videos. This may not be considered as nostalgia, but rather as a need to remember and to understand, so that this troubled past do not fall into oblivion and can be used as a lesson to avoid making the same errors again. A reminder of human craziness and of the vanity of all those military undertakings which created nothing but suffering. This is all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe. And as always, have a nice day.